Have you ever knelt beside your bed, tears streaming down uncontrollably, your voice hoarse as you asked, God, why did you let me meet him? Why did you let me love someone so deeply only to watch him leave? Have you ever cried out in your heart again and again? If this relationship was never meant to last, why did you let it begin in the first place? If you've ever asked these questions, then today I want to tell you something you may have never heard before. Let me take you back to that night. The last time you argued, he said, let's take some time to cool down. You hung up the phone, and suddenly the room became unbearably quiet. You sat on the edge of your bed, your mind filled with all those beautiful memories. The first time you held hands, the first time you said I love you, the first time you planned a future together. You were so sure it was him. So sure this relationship was a blessing from God. You opened your phone and scrolled through your messages from sweetness to conflict, from closeness to distance. You stared at his profile picture, your finger hovering over the screen for a long time. And then you let it fall. You didn't dare to send a message because you were afraid he might say something even more hurtful. You stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were still shining, but your world suddenly felt dark. You closed your eyes and asked God, what are you doing? You let me fall in love with him, and then you took him away. Is this how you love me? That night, you didn't get an answer. All you heard was your own crying and the wind howling outside the window. But do you know this? Some relationships are allowed by God to begin, not because he intends to fulfill them, but because he intends to fulfill you through them. What you saw was potential. He could become better. He could love you more. He could grow. But what God saw was a lesson you needed to see, the emptiness deep inside your heart. What you saw was a future. You imagined marriage, a home, growing old together. But what God saw was your weakness. He lifted an ordinary person and made him your God. You longed so deeply to be loved that you treated every message from him as grace, every moment of closeness as salvation. What you didn't realize was that you were no longer just in love, you were worshiping an idol. You used him to fill a place that only God could fill. So, in his mercy, God removed him from your life. Not because God is cruel, but because he loves you too much to let you spend your whole life living in a false hope. What you thought was love was actually fear. You waited for his messages not to share your life, but to confirm that you were still cared for. You feared his silence, his distance, his leaving. Your happiness depended entirely on his response. You placed your entire sense of worth in his hands. But real love is not like that. Real love does not make you anxious and insecure. Real love does not make you keep asking, do you really love me? Real love does not walk away when you need it most. The person you fell in love with may not be a bad person, but he is not the one God prepared for you. You are not walking in the same direction. Your souls are not aligned. Your values, your faith, your vision of the future on, the things that matter most, you are not on the same path. You thought time could fix everything. You thought love could overcome everything. But God knows that some differences cannot be bridged by love alone. So he let him leave because he did not want you to spend your life burning yourself out for someone who does not belong to you. Do you know what happened during your darkest days? He did not save you, but God did. You did not get him back, but you found God's voice. In those days, you cried until you had no strength left. You knelt beside your bed, and for the first time, you stopped praying for him and began praying for yourself. You stopped asking, God, please bring him back, and started asking, God, what do you want me to learn? And then you saw it. You saw what you couldn't see before. You had placed too much expectation on one person. Your sense of security, your worth, your belonging, everything was hanging on him. When he left, you collapsed. But God lets you collapse once so that you could stand firm in him. Do you know this? God often allows our hearts to break first so that we will no longer cling to anything, but instead place our hearts fully into his hands. That darkness was not a time when your forgotten it was the moment God was performing the most delicate surgery in your soul. He removed, piece by piece, everything that did not belong to him, and then he placed himself there. Many people ask me, so when will I meet the right person? I want to tell you when. You no longer need the right person to make you complete. Do you know why? Because a starving person will cling to anyone, but a whole person can recognize who is truly walking the same path. When God heals you, you no longer need someone to prove your worth, fill your emptiness, or save your loneliness. You begin to long not for passion, but for peace. You begin to seek not a race in heartbeat, but a connection of souls. You begin to care less about how many sweet words he says, and more about whether he remembers you in his prayers. You will recognize true love not because it makes you lose control, but because it brings you calm. It does not pull you away from God, it draws you closer to him. It does not make you anxious, it allows you to stand securely in God's presence. So if you are going through heartbreak right now, if you are still asking, God, why did you let me love the wrong person? I want to tell you this. God has not wasted a single tear of yours. You think you lost someone, but in truth, God rescued you from a much greater trap. You think you reached the end, but in fact, that was the beginning of truly encountering him. He allowed your heart to break so that you would no longer bow to anything else, but only to him. He allowed you to lose so that you would know the love you truly need will never leave. He allowed you to fall so that in the dust, you would finally see his hand. Now, I want to invite you. In the comments, write one word. Faith, not for me, but so that you yourself choose to believe that this broken road is not meaningless. You choose to believe that God has not forgotten you. You choose to believe that the right person will come at the right time, but more importantly, that you have already become the right person. If you have ever gone through this kind of heartbreak, write that word in the comments and remind yourself you are not alone. And please share this message with that friend who is still crying. Let her know she is not abandoned. She is being prepared. Because one day, when she looks back, she will see that was not brokenness. That was refinement. That was not loss. That was redemption. That was not the end. That was the beginning.